Guys. In full acknowledgement of the spring break that is quickly approaching, I'm going to try to be as to the point as I can. I'm going to try to not drag this out. I think many of you, from what I've seen anyway, are sort of finally getting the idea of what we're trying to do in this paper, which is good. Um, in the off chance that some of you are still not quite sure on that front, we're going to cover that one more time a little bit. But mostly today, we're actually going to skew much harder in the direction of okay, um, we have some information now. Hopefully, we've done some thinking about that now. And how do we make this into a paper, right? What you're looking at here on the screen is the document that I've uploaded to CourseDen. It is one of your classmates' submissions for the most recent homework. We have their introduction and their first body paragraph. I assume it's their first body. Anyway, it's probably the first body paragraph because it's probably the only one they've written for now. All right. So if you have not already, as always, please go ahead review those two paragraphs. It shouldn't take you, 5 minutes. Go ahead and do that. I'll give you a second. Hopefully you paused, did that, some iteration thereof. All right. The very first paragraph here, which as I said is an introduction. To begin with, as I always like to point out, they have all the parts, right? But they kind of get bogged down at times, and that it creates some other issues. So you'll notice um, up at the top, I mean, I suppose this is our hook. This is kind of the definition variety, I suppose. They're telling us what an influencer is. I don't mind it, although I don't know if it's necessary. I mean, especially in 2022, does anybody not really know what that means? Um, so it's debatable whether or not we really need that. The more important point, though, is we go on at length with that definition. How far does our discussion of the term influencer go? I mean, it's still rolling, it's still rolling. We finally get to something specific here. Look how deep into the introduction that is, and look how much of our introduction is left. That tells you you cannot really start an argument until you start to get to specifics, until you focus on some kind of text. It seems like pretty clear at this point we're going to be talking about Jake Paul, okay? But we've given ourselves no room to do that, right? So step one, and it'd be an easy step, it might be a little bit painful, but step one would be you got to trim most of this. I mean, I don't know if we need any of this, to be quite honest with you. Uh, yeah, really. You could delete that, get right to this Jake Paul business, and then from there, what do we have left? We're saying he has a lot of controversies. One thing we're going to cover here in a moment is maybe pick one or two because you can't cover everything everyone has ever done, especially a guy like this. So, that'd be a step in the right direction there. But here again, what does that leave us with? And I know I've told you this before, but I want to reiterate it here. When you lack focus, so we're finally specific with Jake Paul, but then we balloon outward again, we get much more general here. We have nothing to talk about. We're saying, why does he still have a platform? I'm curious why we're talking about that, right? Um, why does he still have subscribers? These are interesting questions, but I think we need to build to them, and we have not done that. I don't know at this point what controversies we're alluding to. And the good news is it gets us to a kind of a thesis, and I'm going to call this a working thesis. What does that mean? A working thesis is, first of all, a thesis. This is like if you had to turn this paper in today, this kind of fits the mold we're looking for. So, again, for those of you out there who still aren't quite sure what we're aiming for, things like this is kind of the bar we want to make sure we at least hit. Okay, the reason why Jake Paul receives publicity despite his horrible actions is simply that people love hating on others and using people to feel better about themselves. Now, you'll notice this student isn't actually talking about why Jake Paul does the things that he does. I mean, this thesis is absolutely related to that, this argument. Their text, the thing that they're actually making an argument about, is why people basically give this guy the time of day, right? Some of you may be fans of this person, some of you may have never heard of him. And also, it seems like they're talking about kind of Jake Paul's early career, which is a weird sentence. He's kind of changed lanes now, right? But anyway, That's what they're making their paper about. Again, is how we respond to this person. In this case, to this person's antics, right? Um, and that's kind of the argument they came up with. I call it a working thesis. Number one, again, because we haven't really built to it. We haven't made much of an argument beforehand in the introduction. So that tells me in most cases there's more to be said here. There's more, I mean, sort of thoughts to have. And chances are very good once we do that, we build out that roadmap, the thesis is going to change in some way. Okay, so you just need to kind of leave yourself available to that. And number two, based upon what I've seen in the rest of the paper, which again we'll talk about here in a second, I'm also kind of wondering what smaller arguments they want to make as a result of that. So, for instance, to maybe make this clearer, people love hating on others. That's kind of half of their argument. The other half being feel better about themselves. This one I kind of get a little more. I mean, again, we need to explain it in the introduction, but this one, people love hating on others. I assume the student, again, is talking about, I mean, the phenomenon that's existed forever, which is just haters, right? That's a phrase that we have. But I don't know. I worry that's oversimplified. Like, sure, some people love hating on other people, and maybe a lot of that is so that those haters can feel better about themselves. Like, that's fair. Is there any more to that? Is there any other reason people might sort of flock to this guy, pay attention to him? For instance, it seems like she's talking about people that hate this guy. Okay, what about the people that are actually his fans? I sincerely doubt all of his subscribers, all of his followers hate the guy. What about the people that are really into it? What about them? They're not hating on him. Um, Maybe they also feel better about themselves, or maybe it's just some other aspect of like human nature in 2022 that we haven't identified here, right? My point is there's like a huge chunk of this argument that's probably missing that we haven't really thought about to this point. So we'd want to do that. Of course, we would first want to try to really do that in the body of the paper. And we only have one paragraph, so you know there's plenty of time to figure that other stuff out. What I want you to do now, and I can't get it all up on screen, so again, if you have not read it yet, you want to refer to the document because it's too long, right? Take a minute here, pause the video if you need to, go look at it, and we will talk about it. Go ahead. Okay. Now then, what has happened here? You will notice, I hope, that there's really no argument in this body paragraph whatsoever, right? Why is that? Well, quite honestly, what this paragraph is some of the information that we probably needed in our introduction. And I say some because the paragraph is all information. Truth be told, it's a pretty concise sort of career biography for this guy. I mean, again, for his early career, um, it's pretty well done in terms of covering like years in the span of one paragraph. Again, the problem with that is there's so much information we cannot deal with any of it. We don't have the room, and also your brain just is not capable. You can't take all this and then make an argument out of all of it. So what tends to happen is you don't make an argument at all. The trick would be number one, we just got to own the fact that this can't be a body paragraph as it is. You know, um, what I would really characterize this as, it's more a part of the drafting process. I think what probably happened, they wrote this introduction, you know, they spent too long talking about influencers because this is them just trying to really figure out what they want to say about this guy. They finally get to the guy himself. They give themselves some questions here. These are comma splices. These should all be separate questions. But this is really where they start. And from there, and again, I know I say this all the time in different kinds of ways, your brain, even if you don't realize it consciously, almost every time will say, man, I need actual facts. I need some kind of information to chew on if I'm going to try to talk about any of this. And then what happened as a result is their brain, I guess, just exploded with facts. Okay. Bad news is we basically got to delete this paragraph. The good news, and I mean this, the good news is we have a pretty incredible menu to choose from. We do have to choose. We got to be really pointed in our decision here what we're going to focus on. I suppose, fortunately for this student, given all the stuff they're talking about Jake Paul here, they got a lot to choose from, but choose one or maybe two things at most. Ideally, if you're choosing two things, they would be very related to one another. They maybe even occur close together. That will help you with research as well. But what are we going to pick here? I mean, for the sake of our purposes, I mean, they're talking about Vine. It's not the Vine, by the way. I know that doesn't matter, but I'm older than you. It was just called Vine. I mean, again, all of this is fine. It kind of depends on what you really want to focus on for the guy, I guess. So most of this is stupid. And what I mean is, some of you may be familiar with the movies, but again, I'm older than you. I grew up with a show called Jackass. Um, he's kind of in that vein, right? He just does Jackass type stunts and or again pranks, things like this. They put funny in quotation marks. Obviously, the student is not a fan, um, and that's kind of one side of it, right? Another side of it is, I guess he was on Disney for a little while. I didn't know anything about that. That's super weird. Um, that could be what we focus on instead. So one option is the Jackass stuff. Another option is his, I suppose, short-lived Disney career. You got this mansion business, which is another potential angle, and then finally, the much more serious. Let me find it down here. He's scamming people. I mean, that's kind of serious. Um, oh, and then we have a much more recent deal in 2020 where he gets caught, I suppose, looting during a Black Lives Matter protest. Um, oh, and parties during the pandemic. I mean, I think one of those would be fine. I don't think you need both. But again, the point I'm making here is the last bit is much more serious. So step one would be, what angle are we really going to take when we talk about this guy? You can't do all of this. I'd pick one of these 3 or 4 options. You know, for our purposes, let's go with the most recent. Um, and again, even here, I'm not sure which one I would want to choose. It would either be parties during the pandemic or looting during. I happen to know a little bit about him getting caught looting during the Black Lives Matter stuff. Very little, by the way. I don't know about the parties during the pandemic at all, but so let's think about that. What's the issue there? Obviously, um, he caught hell for that, and that would tie into their thesis a little bit. But I hope it would start to become pretty clear that if we happen to use the looting stuff as our sort of example, right, that we're going to talk about, I think our discussion is very quickly going to get a little more serious than just he has haters. You see what I'm saying? If, on the other hand, we rolled with the Jackass stuff and just he's trying to be quote unquote funny and he's really just kind of a jerk, that makes more sense. So here already, as soon as we get more specific than just naming the guy and very, very briefly covering the fact that he's controversial, what controversies are we focusing on? That's that's going to shape our thesis in a lot of ways. Um, so I guess what I'm saying is I kind of just did this part on the fly because there was so much information. Um, Given what they have, actually, I don't know that they want to focus on the serious stuff. I'm going to shift gears. I think they want to focus on the Jackass stuff. To me, then, what might be more fruitful and potentially more fun, because even if you don't like the guy, it's more fun to think about all the ridiculous stuff these people engage in. Go find one or two at most of these quote unquote funny jokes that maybe blew up, you know? Again, the only one I know of is much more serious. I believe this was Jake Paul. He went to the suicide forest in Japan and like legit found a dead body and all that. Like, that's more serious. So again, I don't know that you can talk about haters there. because I think all of us feel like that's a little bit justified. Um, so yeah, but again, if you end up talking about something like that, just to be clear, you would need to change your thesis. Um, but if it's just this funny stuff and he's just kind of a douche, uh, and now we're saying people want to engage with this material because they want to hate on him, right? Another way to talk about that is because they want to judge him for doing these things that I suppose they would not do. Yeah. Okay. Why is that? The one reason they've given us is to feel better about themselves. Sure. Sure. That's viable. That makes some sense to me, I suppose. Um, what do you do with the fact? Now we're just kind of musing, right? What do you do with the fact that like it's never or almost never one person online who has this opinion, right? It's a bunch of people that tend to have similar opinions and they agree with each other and they hardcore disagree with anybody who disagrees with them, right? So kind of band together. We have this idea of tribalism, might be worth looking into here. Um, what we're doing at this stage is we're kind of defining what we mean by feel better about themselves. I think what they're getting at is like in terms of like a moral high ground, they feel like they're morally superior to this Jake Paul person. Sure. But on the other hand, again, you also find like-minded individuals online, and you kind of support each other in your moral high groundedness. Yeah. Again, on the flip side, I'd be wildly interested to see, first of all, what the student thinks, but also what they might be able to find about why, either why Jake Paul has fans or why people like him have fans at all. Actually, I'm gonna see real quick. Someone has to have asked this question already. Well, that's interesting. That's very Business Insider. That's really interesting. There's that guy. Oh, so they're talking about a whole lot of stuff. So this may be an excellent article if they don't have it already. Talking about a recent stunt setting furniture on fire in his rental home's backyard. Uh, yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a lot of insanity here. They've not yet said why people like him. Okay, so they're talking about his fans that they chant his name. Um, Look at that idiot. Anyway, oh no. So this person went to actually see this. That's a really interesting angle. This is interesting. Look at this. Some they're not even fans. They just want to be part of it, basically, right? If something crazy happens, they'll be able to be there, and they could Snapchat it. They could take pictures of themselves while they're there. Um, oh my God, this website is terrible. Um, this quotation down here. So they're just bored, and it's just something to do. It's just so what we what we've discovered here is some stuff about his fans, which they may go into more detail. I'm not going to go all the way through this article. And people that are actually in the middle, these people don't seem to hate the guy, although they may jump into that camp when he does something quote unquote funny, right? But mostly they just want to be there to report it. They want to be there to sort of be part of it, be included, be able to say on their own Twitter profiles, oh yeah, I was there when that guy totally destroyed that car or whatever, right? What's that about? That's a really interesting angle that I think actually a lot of people fall into a lot of the time. This idea that people, I mean, I think the word you guys maybe use these days is clout, right? But it's bragging rights. It's again just the ability to say to like it's it's almost like we leech off of other people's fame when we're doing that sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? Like this guy's doing the crazy stuff, but you can get some of that yourself just by being nearby, either literally in the case of that article or figuratively in the case of Twitter. It's like I was one of the first people to see this and share it with all my friends, so like I'm associated with it, right? Like that's a weird phenomenon that's worth considering. My point here is I promised I'd keep this brief. I feel like I've already broken that promise a little bit. What I'm wanting to show you here is a couple things. Number one, again, you write how you write. This student writes how they write. They started out super vague. We can fix that pretty easily, actually. We can cut most of this, as we said, get to Jake Paul quicker, which will allow us to talk about him in more specific terms. And again, unfortunately, we're going to have to lose this paragraph, but it has given us a great menu to select from. And in the event that we still need to do some of this, to guide some of our research. I mean, I'm going to hazard a guess and say, based upon this huge body paragraph full of information, they may not have really decided what they want to write about yet. Well, pick something. In this case, based upon their thesis and based upon the quickest of searches, I kind of talked myself into, if I'm this student, writing about the dumb stuff this guy does and the people that want to see it, that want to be part of it. Some of them are fans. Apparently, some of them aren't. Like again, they're not detractors either. They're just there. They were bored today, and I'm sure it goes on and on about that stuff. Um, that's really interesting. That's worth thinking about. I think we could build a much more complex argument, and of course, a more complex thesis as a result. And then that's going to guide our body paragraphs in a much more specific fashion. All the things this guy has done, right? That would be my aim for this particular paper. Again, everybody's paper is a little bit different because all of our texts are a little bit different, but they can all function in this way. So, job number one, be much more specific. Job number two, you probably still need to be much more specific. I think most of you are struggling with the idea that you want to name a person or a movement or whatever, and you're going to talk about that whole thing. I'm going to tell you again and again, you cannot do that. You do not have time for that. What you're trying to do is write a book in the span of 3 pages. You do not have time or space for that, okay? So pick something very specific, in this case, that this guy did, and then you can dive into your research and dive into how people respond. And of course, your argument has to do with why they respond that way. All right, finally, very, very quickly, I want to review our syllabus. So this is the week we're in. Bibs were due Tuesday. Intro and body paragraph is due Thursday, which again, as always, is what this video is dated for, but I'm putting it out on Wednesday. And of course, we have spring break next week. I'm sure you knew about that. The week we come back, that's what I want to review really quickly. You'll notice that first day back, I have no homework listed because I'm not a fool. I understand that when you come back from spring break, you're not going to do anything. Like, you're not going to have something that you've done. Like, that's just silly. I could assign something and then have pretty much no one do it. So I try to live in reality as best I can. What that means is, for that Thursday of the week we come back, you will have 2 more body paragraphs due. Sorry, there's a cat in here and I can't find it. It's distracting the hell out of me. You will have 2 more body paragraphs due, 2 coursed in for the Thursday we come back. I feel like that's a huge chunk of time between now and then. And as always, I don't know anybody's plans. I think in many cases, you guys don't even really know your plans in any specific fashion. That's fine. I just want to illustrate for you 2 weeks from this Thursday, you got to have 2 new body paragraphs. So not counting the one you've turned in for this assignment. The good news is, if you're able to do that, man, your paper is really coming along at that point, right? The other thing, though, is you can easily get lost with this guy right in the middle. Totally forget about everything related to school. Yeah, so just put it on your radar. Figure out a time and a place you're going to actually make that happen. Is it going to happen in here? Almost certainly not. But if you at least give yourself some notes, something like that on this side of it, on the other side, when you come back, maybe you can pound out those 2 body paragraphs before that Thursday. You'll be in pretty good shape. Other than that, I hope everyone is safe, whatever they decide to do. Even if you just go nowhere, you'd be surprised the trouble you can get in. Yeah, that's all I got. Take it easy. Thanks.